Today, we are going to be looking at the title of Sabbath Healing. Sabbath Healing. This is an interesting topic that we're going to be looking at. Last week, just to kind of give you a background of where we've been at, last week we saw how Jesus healed the son of an official of King Herod, right? And through that miracle Jesus performed, that man was able to see that Jesus really was the Christ, the Son of God. Because of what Jesus showed him, that man grew step by step in his faith in Jesus. And in the end, just like the woman at the well and the people in her town, he also came to believe that Jesus truly is the Christ, the Son of God. And this is the reason Jesus tells these miracles. He tells us about 7, 8 miracles that he revealed, that he talks about in his Gospel of John. And he tells them for a purpose, so that we also could see what they saw, that Jesus is truly the Christ, the Son of God. The interesting thing is that not everyone responds. Now, everyone who sees these signs of Jesus responds in faith. Not everyone responds by believing in Jesus. There are also those who see the signs of Jesus, and instead of believing in him, they choose to reject him. And over the next few weeks, we're going to look at a certain group of people who John chooses this next miracle for us to see that not only can we choose to believe in Jesus through the miracles that he shows us, but we can also, through the people in the story that we're going to look at, we can also choose to reject Jesus, even in seeing the miracles, the signs that display who Jesus is. So today we're going to look at the third sign that John tells us about. And first, today we're going to see the love that Jesus shows to a man who was at the edge of completely losing all hope. And this is our passage. John chapter 5, we're going to look at verses 1 through 16. Verse 1 says this. After this, talking about the healing of the man when Jesus went to Galilee, and the official's son, he healed the official's son. Then they settled in Capernaum for a while. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, we don't know exactly when this happened, what festival it was. It doesn't say what festival it was. It just says that it was a festival of the Jews. So we're not really sure when it happened. But we do know one thing about this festival is after Jesus goes to the festival, he comes back. So he went to Jerusalem specifically for this festival. They make the journey up to Jerusalem. They arrive at Jerusalem. And when they come into Jerusalem, they come upon a group of people who are sick and crippled. Man, it stinks to be sick and crippled, doesn't it? Verse 2 says this. Now there is at Jerusalem, by the sheep market, a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. Do you know what Bethesda means? It's really interesting. Bethesda is 2 words combined together. House, Beth, and Bethesda. The Esda is the meaning of mercy. Mercy and grace. Mercy and grace. So house of mercy, house of grace. This is really interesting. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. Interesting. Verse 4, for an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water, and whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. A lot of people gathered at this pool because it was said that whenever the waters were moved by an angel, whoever got into that water first would be healed. This is an interesting thing. Whether or not this was actually true, we don't know. It's very possible that God in his grace and his mercy chose to allow an angel to move the waters on occasion, and people who went in there got healed. It's also possible that it was simply a legend, that it was something that people had said for years and years, and everybody believed it. And those who were gathered at the pool were there as the last hope of being healed. We don't know which it is, but one thing we do know, there was a lot of people there who were sick, who were crippled, who were at their last hope of being healed. And this water was their only hope of rescue or restoration. One of those who was at the pool was a man who had been crippled for a very long time. Verse 5. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. 38 years. He had some kind of sickness, and we're going to learn this later, that made it impossible for him to walk. He couldn't walk. Something was wrong with his legs. He tells us this because later on he says he needs somebody to carry him, right? So we know it was something wrong with his legs. But can you imagine what it must have been like for this man to be sick, to be without being able to use your leg for 38 years? This pool was his last hope of being healed. Think about that. Man, just like everyone else around him, his eyes are glued to the water. Eyes are glued to the water. His eyes are fixed on the water. If any moment that water moves, it's his like, he's really hoping everybody else isn't looking at the water when it moves, because it's his only chance, because everybody else is going to get him faster than him. So he's constantly, day in, day out, looking at the water, eyes on the water. Eyes on the water. Maybe, just maybe, he can get into the water before anybody else. As his eyes are fixated on the water, never wanting to let go of the sight of the water, he's surprised by a stranger coming up to him and talking to him. He doesn't know anybody around here. Why is somebody coming up and talking to him? And the stranger asks, of all people, he comes to him and asks him a very unusual and unexpected question. What's the question? Verse 6. When Jesus saw him lie and knew that he had been there now a long time in that case, in that situation, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? Do you want to get well? Do you want to get better? It's an interesting question, isn't it? I mean, yeah, you would think. You would think, of course, why would he even want to have to ask that question? We would assume the answer would be yes, of course, right? Isn't it interesting that Jesus often asks these kinds of questions to the people he encounters? Do you want to be made well? What do you want me to do for you? He gives the people a chance to respond to his questions. He doesn't just automatically heal. He lets the person choose. He gives them a chance to respond. And for this man, he asked the question, would you like to be well? The man responds with a yes, but kind of an answer. I mean, he doesn't know who Jesus is. Like, if some random guy comes up to you and says, hey, you want to get better? Like, how do you respond? I don't know. Of course. You know, that kind of thing, right? Maybe Jesus is going to help him get into the water. Who knows? So he expresses his need to Jesus. And this is what he says, verse 7. The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. His answer kind of reveals where he's at emotionally. He's pretty much at the edge of all hopelessness. He seems to have lost hope in his answer. I don't have anyone to help me. I'm stuck. I'm doomed for this for the rest of my life. He's in a hopeless situation, but not only that, he doesn't have anybody who's willing to help him. One by one, his family and his friends have left him, and now he's all alone. He's all but given up. So he's probably asking him, what are you going to do? I mean, everybody else has left me. Are you literally going to stay here this whole time while we wait for the water to move, and you're going to just run in and jump in? You got that much free time on your hands to be able to do that kind of a thing? Can't even imagine what he must have gone through for all those years. How lonely and helpless he must have felt. Sometimes we have bad days, don't we? Sometimes those bad days kind of stretch into bad weeks or even bad months. Sometimes we have really rough years too, right? It happens. Sometimes our difficulties last for a long time. For this guy, the bad years just didn't seem to stop. Every year, it just kept staying bad. For 38 years. Do you know how long 38 years is? It's 2023 right now. 38 years before this is 1985. Half of us weren't even born then. Right? 38 years since 1985, you've been struggling with this problem, and you've been trying everything you can think of to find help, to get out of the situation, and there's nothing you can do. Everyone has abandoned you. You have lost all hope. All the hope you have, you're at the point where it's all you can do to just exist. That's your goal, to exist. His eyes are set on the water, even while knowing he's setting his eyes on something that can't help him. Have you ever felt like that? What do you do when you've gone to the edge of losing hope? For this man, Jesus gives him something else to set his eyes on. Jesus basically gives him the option of, instead of setting your eyes on the water, stop looking at the water and look to me. Look at me. Because Jesus is telling him, what I give you is something much greater than simply hope of healing. I can give you healing. Verse 8, Jesus says to him, rise, take up thy bed, and walk. Simple, but powerful. Because in verse 9, and immediately the man was made whole. And he took up his bed and walked. He took up his bed and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath. When the man heard Jesus speak these words, he could sense the strength coming into his legs. Oh man, what in the world? I haven't felt this in forever. It feels like I can feel my legs, and they feel strong. There's no rehab necessary. I can feel like I can get up. He could feel them again. He knew that he had been healed. And then he did something he had not done in a very long time, something that he may not have ever thought he was ever going to do again. He gets up. He gets up. He stands on his own 2 feet. He picks up his mat and out of sheer joy just starts walking around carrying his mat. What in the world? This is amazing. So happy. Can you believe it? He has been there for such a long time, and now he is healed. What an amazing thing. In one moment, 38 years of suffering has transitioned into a moment of sheer joy because of this stranger that Jesus met. Can you imagine the people around him? Oh my goodness. Because everybody knew him. He'd been there for so long. He's like the OG of Bethesda Pool. You know, he's like the original guy there. And now he's healed. Everybody must have been so happy to see that. Almost everybody. There were some who were not very happy. If you mention, John mentioned something very interesting on the very last part of this verse. He says something on purpose. And on the same day was the Sabbath. The Sabbath. Some Jews, probably the Pharisee leaders, were very shocked to see this man walking with his mat. Verse 10. The Jews therefore said unto him that was cured, it's the Sabbath day. It's not lawful for thee to carry thy bed. What do you think you're doing? Hey, you over there. Hey, what's going on over there? What do you think you're doing carrying your mat like that? Don't you know what today is? Today's the Sabbath. And you know what we're supposed to do on the Sabbath. You know the rules around here. We're not supposed to be carrying our bed on the Sabbath. What do you think you're doing? You know you've committed a huge sin and you're going to pay for it. The rules that these Jewish leaders were talking about were not God's rules. They were talking about the rules that they had made on top of God's rules as an extra measure of protection to follow God's rules. God's rules are simple. They're easy to understand. They made it incredibly difficult. All kinds of random rules. You can move some things, but you can't move it with your hand. You can move it with your elbow, but not with your hand. All kinds of random rules that they made to ensure that everyone followed God's law. One of those was you can't carry anything for a very long period of time. And here was this guy doing the exact thing that they had made a rule against. It's like making rules in the middle of a game. It's like, no, you can't do this. Oh, suddenly you can't do that. This guy was doing it. He was breaking the rules. What are you doing carrying around your bed? You know you're not supposed to do that. They got mad at him. Verse 11. He answered them. He that made me whole, the same said unto me, take up thy bed and walk. Listen, guys, if someone's got the power to make me whole, whatever he tells me to do, I'm going to do it. It makes sense, doesn't it? Here is a man who was completely healed. And the funny thing is, the Jews completely ignore the fact that he has been made whole. They completely ignore the incredible miracle that had just happened and instead choose to focus on the man breaking their own rules. For them, instead of wanting to know who had the power to heal this man, they wanted to know who would be telling this man to be walking and carrying his bed on the Sabbath instead. They completely overlook and ignore the miracle, the magnitude of the miracle, and focus on the fact that this man did a horrible thing by breaking their rules of the Sabbath. Verse 12. Then they asked him, what man is that which saith unto me, take up thy bed and walk? Who in the world would tell you to do something like that? We're going to find him. Verse 13. And he that was healed wist not who it was, for Jesus had conveyed himself away, a multitude being in that place. Here is this man who had been healed. He had no idea who Jesus was. He was just a stranger. All he knew was that a stranger came out of nowhere, and in one moment, with one question and one command, had changed his life. Before he or anyone else could find out who he was, he had disappeared into the crowd. And here's the thing. Of all the sick people there, he had healed no one else. Just him. That stranger had come to that place just to heal him. Amazing. Sometime later, Jesus finds this man. He finds him in the temple. I love that. He finds him in the temple. Praising. I'm sure he's praising God. I can't believe this, Lord. I get to stand here and I get to praise your name. This is amazing. I never thought this would ever happen, but it's happened. I'm right here. Lord, this is amazing. It's a good place for him to be, isn't it? At the temple. Jesus tells this man something very interesting, though. Verse 14 says this, afterward Jesus findeth him in the temple and said unto him, behold, thou art made whole. You're clean. You're fixed. You have been healed. You have been restored. Then he says, sin no more, lest the worst thing come unto thee. Sin no more, lest the worst thing come unto thee. Listen, man, you have been made whole. You have been fully restored. Don't sin anymore so something worse doesn't happen to you. We don't know why this man's legs no longer worked. The Bible doesn't tell us. But it seems like Jesus is connecting some sin in his past to his condition. But here's the thing. He's telling him that he's been fully restored. He has been given not only a second chance, but also freedom. Freedom to walk away from whatever sin that was. Jesus is telling him, you have been made whole. You have been restored. You don't have to go back to that life, to that sin anymore. So don't go back. We know not everything bad that happens to us is because of our sin. The Bible is very clear about that. But sometimes something bad can happen because of our sin, right? And maybe this is Jesus revealing his heart to him, revealing his own heart to him. Remember like how he did with the Samaritan woman? You know, you got 5 husbands and the guy that you're with right there, he's not your husband either. You know how he sometimes reveals to us our heart's condition? God often, and we've seen this pattern over and over again, where Jesus not only reveals who he is, but he also, in revealing himself, he also helps us to see ourselves in a new way too, and to reveal our heart to our own selves so we can see him, but also our need for him. Maybe this is what Jesus is doing for this man. It seems like his response is a lot like the woman at the well too. Do you remember what she did once Jesus told him, hey, you got 5 husbands and the 6th guy that you're with, he's not your husband? What did he do? After that conversation, she runs back into town and she tells everybody, listen, I met the man who told me all things I ever did. Is this not the Christ? When somebody meets Jesus and discovers who he is and discovers his need for him and what he provides, the natural response is to tell others about who Jesus is. Verse 15 says something interesting. The man departed and told the Jews it was Jesus which had made him whole. As I was studying for this, I noticed that there were quite a few people who had mentioned that this man, once he found out it was Jesus who healed him, in order to get out of trouble from the Jews, basically threw Jesus under the proverbial bus. Maybe it was a wagon at that time, I don't know. They threw him under the bus. That's what he did. And it's definitely possible. It's possible that this is what the man was thinking. But man, I think there's a different reason. And I could be wrong. It could be that, okay, think about it. If I couldn't walk for 38 years, and suddenly in one moment, someone heals me and restores me and makes me whole again, the last thing I want to do is betray him. But I do want to tell everybody about the one who had made me whole again. If you look through the Bible, so many people respond by telling others about Jesus, the one who had made him whole, right? Constantly. It's a constant and consistent thing. And if you look here, this is what the man is telling the Jews. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who what? Had made him whole. While their focus was on the Sabbath, his focus was on the healing. Jesus is the one who has the power to do what no one else, including you Jews, including you Jewish leaders, nobody could do anything for me for 38 years. And then this guy comes and makes me completely and fully whole. Unfortunately, we know the response of the Jews, right? It's not good. Verse 16. And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. It may have been an unintended result for the man who was healed. But I have absolutely no doubt that this is exactly what Jesus had planned all along. it was no accident that Jesus healed this man on the Sabbath. It was no accident that Jesus came to this man to heal him. It was no accident that he went to him again to talk to him in the temple to reveal who he was. And here's why it's not an accident. This sign that Jesus did wasn't done just to reveal the heart of the man who had been healed. This miracle was the very beginning of Jesus revealing the hearts of the Jewish leaders. It wasn't just the heart of the man he was revealing. It was the leaders, the Jewish leaders, their hearts he was revealing. And this miracle was the very beginning of the Jewish leaders choosing to reject Jesus. Their rejection of him became the reason they would begin to persecute Jesus. Think about this. This miracle was Jesus' first active step to the cross. Jesus healed on the Sabbath to begin his journey to the cross. He came to Bethesda. He came to heal this man from his sin. Why? So that he could go to the cross to heal us from our sin. It's an amazing thing to think about. Next week, we're going to have the Lord's Supper. This week, I think it would be good for us to remember how far Jesus is willing to go to break the chains of our sin. How far Jesus is willing to go to rescue us, to redeem us. Out of the crowds, out of all of the people around us who had not yet met Jesus, Jesus came to us and he revealed himself to us and he revealed our heart, our need for a rescuer, a healer, a redeemer, a shepherd. And he came to us and revealed himself and he revealed our own hearts so that we too had the choice, had the choice to respond. And we by faith trusted in him. And you, if you have not yet, if you choose to put your trust in him, having Jesus, having revealed himself to you and to reveal your own heart to you, by faith, you too can trust him. For those of us who have, it's important that we take time to thank him for coming to where we are, to reveal himself to us and to reveal our own hearts to us. And in so doing, giving us the choice to put our trust in him. You have that choice. It's your choice. You can choose to trust him, put your faith in him. You can also choose to reject him. He gives you that option. It's up to you to choose to trust or to choose to reject. For those of us who have trusted and are trusting him, that's time to thank Jesus. Take time to thank Jesus this week. Thank him for being willing to take our punishment on the cross so that we could have the freedom to walk each step in abundant life. Because he has chosen to take the path that we should have taken to the cross. You have life. You get to walk each day in abundant life because Jesus chose to walk the path of death on the cross for our sakes. You've been given a great gift, much greater than simply healing of your legs, much greater than restoration from sickness. You have been given. You have been made whole, made completely whole, rescued and restored from sin itself. Like Jesus says, we have a new purpose for living. We no longer have to go back to the old life of sin. We don't ever have to go there. Jesus has freed us from it. We get to walk each day in newness of life for a new purpose, a new reason. The reason that God had originally created us for was to glorify God, to trust Him, to please Him in our faith in Him, and to reveal His glory to those around us in our trust and obedience in Him. That's you. That's what you get to do. So, remember that. Remember the path that Jesus was willing to take. He did it not by accident, but on purpose. Jesus chose to go to the cross. And here we see the beginning of it all. The first sign that Jesus took to reveal His steps to the cross. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. Let's pray. Father, thank you. What an amazing thing. Here in this passage is this unknown man. One guy out of a whole bunch of guys who had set their eyes on the water of the pool in hopes of healing. Jesus, you come to him. You make him whole. And in so doing, you begin the process that is required to make each of us who by faith are made whole through the cross. Thank you for being willing to take those steps. We're going to see how much it cost you to heal that man, how much it cost for you to go to the cross. Thank you for that. I pray that each of us in our own way can honor and glorify you in the way that we choose to trust in you, in the way that we choose to obey you, listen to your words and abide in you, and in faith follow the things that you tell us to do. And in so doing, I pray that you would be glorified in us. We ask this in the name of Jesus, our rescuer, our healer, our shepherd. Amen.